Député, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
We all know we're in a fight to save our healthcare system. Public health care, single payer, universal health care is at risk, and I think it's important we revisit our history. I know this history firsthand, not from books, but because a dear friend of mine, the late Jim McNeil, was part of the Saskatchewan CCF government that brought in that health care. We forget that the profiteering doctors of Saskatchewan went out on strike to block health care. We forget that foreign doctors came in so the people of Saskatchewan would have medical care, mostly doctors from the UK. And when they got to Saskatchewan, I don't know how many Canadians know this, Jim told me, the Saskatchewan doctors blocked access to hospitals for all the foreign doctors. UK doctors were operating on kitchen tables. Members of the Saskatchewan cabinet had family members who needed medical care. They were up against it, and they were brave. They held the line. We owe it to them to do the same and protect our public health care system from profiteering privatization.
Just I want to remind members that the hum of side discussions is quite high, so I just want to remind members that we are in session here. The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Thank you, Madame la Présidente. This Christmas season, when families were preparing to gather and celebrate, catch up with loved ones, our community was shaken to its core upon learning of a devastating mass shooting. One gun led to the loss of 6 lives and carved an unforgettable scar in the city of Vaughan. Our community, known for its generosity and can-do spirit, was shaken by this horrific act of violence. Madame la Présidente, like all Vaughan residents, I've kept the victims, Rita Camilleri, Victoria Panza, Russell Manick, Lorraine Manick, Navid Dada, and survivor Doreen Danino and their families in my thoughts since this dark December 18th. We know there is no place for gun violence in Canada, not in Saskatchewan, not in Nova Scotia, Toronto, Quebec City, or the city of Vaughan. Nowhere. Our country will never forget the innocent lives lost and bright futures that have been taken way too soon. To our first responders, thank you for your swift response, your professionalism, and your commitment to keeping our communities safe and secure. Thank you.
The honourable member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Madam Speaker, one of my favorite local events was back this year for the first time since the pandemic. Joe Loweth and Sons Dairy Farm in Copetown held their annual open house on December 27th, so that people from the city could learn more about where their food comes from. Other Hamilton area dairy producers pitched in to help with a crowd of nearly 1,000. Robotic milking, feeding, calving were all on full display. But what's more exciting is they were already showcasing a bright new building just steps from the dairy barns. This summer, it will open as a thriving new farm-to-table business and the latest agritourism attraction. Not only will Summit Station Dairy and Creamery be a landmark that celebrates local heritage, it's also entrepreneurialism at its best. Congratulations to Ben, Jen, Carl, David, and the entire Loweth family for their contribution to the local economy and generations of innovation in the dairy industry.
The honourable member for Halifax West.
Madame la Présidente, 2 weeks ago, Gerard and Jenny Barron, neighbours and Halifax West residents, were the proudest parents in Montreal's Bell Centre. Why, you ask? Because for the first time ever, they got to watch their boys go head-to-head as the only siblings from Nova Scotia to ever play in the NHL. Morgan plays for the Winnipeg Jets, while Justin plays for the Montreal Canadiens. The story of their success is incredible. At 16, Morgan left home to play 2 seasons at St. Andrews College, earning himself a scholarship to Cornell. He was later drafted by the New York Rangers and was traded to Winnipeg. Justin spent his entire junior career with the Halifax Mooseheads. He was selected by the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the 2020 NHL draft and was traded to the Habs. Please join me in congratulating both Barons on their tremendous success on the ice. Woohoo!
The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, very few people have been able to represent the soul of a people like Madame Viola Léger with her character La Sagouine. Viola Léger was La Sagouine, and for many of us, La Sagouine was Acadia. For over 50 years, thousands of time, Madame Léger represented this wise person who had been affected by life and injustice and the suffering that has been suffered by the Acadian people. If La Sagouine was created by her friend Antonine Maillet, it was Viola Léger who gave her life. Viola Léger was a proud Acadian, and more than that, she contributed to the cultural development of Acadia throughout her life, particularly through her foundation to promote Acadian theatre. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, and on behalf of all Quebecers, I wish to offer to her family, to all those who loved her, and to all Acadians, our most sincere condolences. Thank you, Madame Léger, for have been, for such a long time, the face, the voice, and the soul of the Acadian nation. The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Mr. Speaker, at the recent Hockey World Juniors, 5 members of the Sherbrooke Phoenix QMJHL team stood out. Team Canada's Joshua Roy and Tyson Hines, as well as coach Stéphane Julien, represented Sherbrooke by winning the gold medal with Team Canada. And 2 other Phoenix players, David Spejcik and Jacob Brabenich, deservedly brought home silver medals with the Czech team. Congratulations to all the medal winners and participants in the tournament. With the Phoenix, hockey fans in Sherbrooke are lucky to be able to gather every week and see some of the best players in the world at home in Sherbrooke in the electrifying atmosphere of the Palais des Sports. Together, let's continue to support and improve our national support.
The Honourable Member for Perth Wellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The motto of the Order of Canada is "They desire a better country." I can think of few people who more truly embody that motto than newly appointed member of the Order of Canada, Jean Aitchison of Stratford. A nurse by career, Jean has dedicated her time and energy to the service of others. On countless medical mission trips, Jean has provided care to so many in need around the globe. She also founded the Stratford Mission Depot to help coordinate the donation and delivery of medical supplies and equipment. Just this past year, Jean and her team of volunteers saw the need for medical supplies for Ukrainian refugees and sprang into action, quickly amassing 14 cubic meters of medical supplies. Jean is quick to deflect praise away from herself and towards her team of volunteers. And it is that modesty that underscores why she is so deserving of this special recognition. Congratulations, Jean Aitchison.
The Honourable Member for York Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we start the winter session of Parliament, I want to recognize an amazing achievement from students in York Centre over the holidays. Our community rests on the values of kindness and compassion, giving back and showing up for one another. I'm overwhelmed by the generosity that students, families, and staff from Stylecroft Public School showed in December, collecting 200 pounds of food for the North York Harvest Food Bank. This amazing act of kindness allowed North York Harvest to provide hundreds of meals to the most vulnerable members of our community. A special thank you to Principal Karen Barnes and the wonderful staff at Stylecroft PS who organized the campaign, and did not hesitate for one moment when asked and jumped at the opportunity to help. I want to especially thank the generous students and families at Stylecroft. I also want to thank the staff at North York Harvest Food Bank, who provide such an important service every day to those who are facing food insecurity in our communities with integrity and compassion. When we give it home, we grow a community that is strong and supportive.
The Honourable Member for Avalon.
Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to the life of Mr. Dwight Petton, who passed away earlier this month after a short but valiant battle with cancer at the young age of 56. Dwight was a very successful and respected fisherman from our riding who had an enthusiasm for the industry that was surpassed only by the love for his family and passion to his faith. Far away from his home and family in Portagrave, he joined several missionaries throughout his lifetime around the world, including one in Africa and Thailand. Dwight was a successful fisherman and a proud owner of his family business, DMC Enterprise, which he operated side by side with his son Matthew. He took great pride in his fishing vessels and respected as a leader in the industry. For 25 years, he served in the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary. Dwight will be remembered as a loving husband to his wife Cynthia, a wonderful father to his children Melanie, Matthew and Melissa, and his grandchildren who were his pride and joy and who knew him simply as Pop. Dwight, you were taken from us way too soon. Your legacy will live on. Rest easy, my friend.
The honourable member for Red Deer-Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 8 years since this Prime Minister took office, and his soft-on-crime policies have unleashed a crime wave in Canada. This government has made life easier for violent criminals by providing easy access to bail and repealing mandatory minimum sentences for serious crimes. As a result, violent crime has gone up 32% in the past year, and gang-related killings have gone up by 92% since 2015. Furthermore, they have failed to stop the flow of illegal firearms across the border. As a consequence, 5 police officers have tragically lost their lives this past fall in the line of duty. Our communities feel less safe, and this government is making it worse. Despite their dismal record, Liberals recently initiated a ban on hunting rifles and shotguns, making thousands of these firearms illegal. Hunters, farmers, and target shooters are not the problem. Liberals are the problem. This Liberal, made-in-Canada crime wave must stop. Only a Conservative government will do what is necessary to keep violent criminals off our streets.
The honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Anger, pain, misery, and violence. Mr. Speaker, these are the words that have shaped the experience of Iranians, especially brave women of Iran, as they are fueled by their hope and courage in the face of the regime, tyranny, and oppression for the past 4 decades. When no words are powerful enough to describe the atrocities, we can respond with powerful actions. I, alongside my colleagues in York Region Liberal Caucus, have sponsored 7 environmental activists. Going beyond our borders, I have joined members of the Italian and German Parliament, Laura Bolderini and Carmen Veggi, to sponsor Armita Abbasi. Nilufar Bayani is a courageous environmentalist who has been in prison for caring for her motherland, its wildlife, and the environment. Armita Abbasi has been calling for equality for women. Instead of applauding these women, the Iranian regime responded with unlawful imprisonment, abduction, severe torture, and brutal sexual assault. Mr. Speaker, the women of Iran are embodiment of bravery. قلب من همواره برای خاک سرزادگاه هم ایران و فرزندان دلیرش میتپد. با امید ایرانی همیشه آزاد و آباد.
The honourable member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 8 years under this Prime Minister, Canadians are struggling. They're struggling under his wasteful inflationary spending. Mortgage payments are taking a bigger bite out of their paychecks, and food banks have seen a massive increase in families needing their services. Meanwhile, over the last 8 years, Liberals and their well-connected friends have never had it so good. McKinsey & Company, a consulting firm surrounded by controversy and formerly run by the Prime Minister's friend Dominic Barton, has received over $100 million in government contracts since 2015. Canadians deserve to know why the Liberals gave this consulting firm millions of dollars and what kind of influence McKinsey has over this government. They've created an unaccountable shadow government with their consultant friends, and Canadians are paying the price. The Prime Minister needs to come clean with Canadians and his binge spending.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, it was 6 years ago. 100 Canadians gathered at the Grand Mosque of Quebec City. Tragedy struck. 6 men died, 20 others were seriously injured. They died for one reason and one reason only, because they were Muslim, because they were united by faith. This horrible attack showed the ugliest side of humanity. This is born of racism, and this is why we must support dialogue with all. We must unite and not divide. Unite through words, through action, and through humanity.
Speaker, 6 years ago at the Quebec Mosque, 6 men, 6 Canadians died because of their faith. This tragedy reminds us that we always have to be cautious, and we shall condemn any violence based on faith and ethnicity. It's our duty to be careful of any sign of racism, because there is no small racism. We shall unite, not divide. Unite by words, by action, by humanity. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member. The honourable member for Acadie Bathurst. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On January 28, 2023, at the age of 92, the great actress Viola Léger passed away. Initially a nun and a teacher, she will be remembered by Acadians in the whole world as an actress, and specifically for playing the role of La Sagouine from the work of Antonin Maillet. Madame Léger played this legendary character over 3,000 times on stage, in addition to numerous other roles in theatre, film, and television. Madame Léger then sat in the Senate of Canada, where she supported causes such as the fate of minorities, the survival of the French language, and the importance of arts and culture. During her long career, Madame Léger showed her incredible ability to promote Acadia. She was a formidable ambassador for our culture and language, and today all Acadians mourn the death of this great woman. Thank you, Madame Léger, for your invaluable contribution to Acadian culture and for the monumental legacy that you leave behind. Our sincere condolences to her family and friends. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, 6 years ago, a young radicalized man committed a heinous act of violence such as we have rarely seen before. He entered the Quebec City Mosque and opened fire on those present, first with a semi-automatic weapon and then with a handgun. 6 men lost their lives and 19 others were injured. Families were shattered, leaving only by people to kill still being expressed. Right-wing extremist rhetoric normalizes and feeds this radicalization and hatred that targets minorities. The killer was radicalized by words that pushed him to attack and kill Muslims. We still have a lot of work to do through dialogue and better understanding between cultures, but also by taking an uncompromising stance against racism, discrimination, and supremacism. It's an imposing but necessary task, and it's the responsibility of each and every one of us. I would like to remind the honourable members that we need to be quiet so that we can hear the words of our colleagues as they give their SO31s. The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, there are moments that mark the history of a society, of a community, and a family. Tragically, January 29th, 2017 is one of those moments. Families and friends lost loved ones who were cut down by gunfire in the attack on the Grand Mosque of Quebec City, cut down because they were Muslim. Yesterday was the 6th time that we've gathered to commemorate these men whose lives were cut short by hate, a moment to reflect together, but also a moment of hope. Hope that we can live and grow together on the path of understanding and mutual respect.
Ibrahima Bari, Mamadou Tanou Bari, Khaled Belkacemi, Abdelkrim Hassan, Azedine Soufiane, and Aboubakar Tabti.
They wanted to live in peace, happily, without a care for tomorrow. We must ensure that all can live in a way that was stolen from these men. We must insist on the right of every Quebecer to practice the religion of their choice in safety, dignity, and freedom. And every day, we must fight hate in all its forms. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Barrie-Innisfil.
After 8 years of this Prime Minister's high taxes and inflationary deficits, 22% of Canadians, 28% of them women, say they're completely broke. After 8 years, 32% say they'll be in the same boat if prices continue rising. After 8 years, 52% are concerned they don't have enough money to feed their families. After 8 years, 1.5 million Canadians are using food banks every month. After 8 years, young people feel lied to and let down by this Prime Minister. After 8 years, seniors can barely afford groceries, and many are living in the cold, unable to heat their homes. After 8 years, Canadians are anxious, angry, and worried about their future. After 8 8 years, this Prime Minister is completely out of touch and has no solutions to the problem that he's created. After 8 years of dividing Canadians, this is a Prime Minister who cannot be redeemed. He can only be replaced. After 8 years, Canada's Conservatives, led by the member from Carleton, are focused and ready to lead. And as Parliament returns, we will show Canadians why.
The honourable member for Mississauga East Cokesville.
Speaker, I sat with a force of nature 2 weeks ago. Hurricane Hazel McCallion, a dear friend, a mentor, a leader, someone that devoted her life to serving the people of Mississauga, Ontario, and Canada. We're all overcome with sadness by her passing, and our hearts go out to her family. She was always there to lead and to help, helping with the biggest mass evacuation in Canadian history, helping people through the pandemic at 101 years of age young, helping build Mississauga to the successful city it is today. Hazel had great insight and vision, but her greatest strength was her connection with people. Loved by all that met her, with a big heart and a deep caring for community, she will always be remembered as the people's mayor. She was so proud of our country. Last thing she said to me is, "Peter, we live in the best place in the world, Canada." Hazel, on behalf of the Parliament of Canada, we thank you. May you rest in peace.
I have the honor to inform the House that the Clerk of the House has received from the Chief Electoral Officer a certificate of the election and return of Mr. Souza, member for the Electoral District of Mississauga Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to present to you Mr. Charles Souza, member for the Electoral District of Etobicoke, Mississauga Lakeshore, who has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take his seat.
Let the member take his seat. Congratulations. Questions, question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 8 years, this Prime Minister has doubled our national debt and created inflationary deficits. And what did we get for that money? There's more inflation, there's more poverty, and more people resorting to food banks. So where'd the money go? They went to contracts for the Prime Minister's cronies. There's been $15 billion more spent on those contracts. How many of those contracts went to McKinsey? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, 7 years ago, we were elected as a government and we promised to invest in the middle class and all those working hard to join it. And that's precisely what we did with the Canada Child Benefit, with supports for seniors and students. We managed to create millions of jobs and get people out of poverty. Unfortunately, at every step of the way, the Conservatives opposed us. They voted against our investments in dental care, in rental supports, and in childcare. We are going to continue investing. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I asked the Prime Minister how much McKinsey got. He said, well, it was all for the middle class. He's always had difficulty defining what the middle class is. Now we know his definition. It's his friends who make $1,500 an hour as high-priced consultants for his government over at McKinsey, where his personal friend Dominic Barton was the boss. We now know that he spent $15 billion plus per year on high-priced consultants, while Canadians are eating at food banks, living in homeless shelters, and house prices have more than doubled. Again, how much did his government give McKinsey? How much?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition snickers at the middle class, we will stay focused on supporting them. That's exactly what we did by bringing forward supports for low-income renters, supports for families to send their kids to the dentist. These are things that the Conservative Party voted against, just as they stood against the Canada Child Benefit, just as they stood against help for seniors, just as they continued to stand against investments that have Canadians' backs before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and since the pandemic. We will continue to be there for Canadians.
That's right. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 8 years of this Prime Minister, mortgage payments have doubled, up to $7,000 per month for an average house in Toronto. Rent prices have doubled, up to $2,500 a month for an average place in Toronto. The number of people eating at food banks has gone up to 1.5 million, and crime is up 32%. So we wonder where all this $500 billion of inflationary debt actually went. Now we know. Liberal friends got the money. So I'm going to ask a third time. The well-connected insiders at McKinsey, what should the Prime Minister give them? How much?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past number of years, we've invested in supporting Canadians from coast to coast to coast, to lift families out of poverty, to help seniors make ends meet, to invest in low-income renters, to help people access dental care for their kids, to deliver the kinds of things that have made not just Canadians better off, but our whole economy work better. We're going to continue to step up in investing in Canadians while Conservatives continue to push cuts and austerity. And not being there for Canadians. We know that investing in Canadians is the best way to build a better future.
Right. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Prime Minister says that Canadians have never had it so good as they face 40-year highs in inflation, as food prices are up 12% year over year after he brought in a carbon tax on our farmers, as the cost of housing has more than doubled, as students are actually living in homeless shelter. We know why, though, he's so out of touch with these people after 8 years because the people he surrounds himself with, like the high-priced consultants at McKinsey, are doing better than ever. So I'd like to ask him again. This company did work of little or no value according to his own public servants. How much did Canadians have to pay for that?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, Canadians are struggling right now with high inflation caused by global crises, with interest rates, with disruptions in the global supply chains, and that's why we've stepped up to support Canadians. Despite Conservative politicians voting against it, we've been able to keep investing in Canadians while maintaining the best balance sheet in the G7. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio, the lowest deficit of all our G7 partners, and we've put that to work to support the Canadians who need it most. We will continue to be there for the middle class and people working hard to join it.
Very good.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, he finally got him to admit that Canadians are suffering, and it's after 8 years of this Prime Minister. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, we have 40-year highs in inflation. We have 32% increase in crime. We have the TTC transit system in downtown Toronto overtaken by crime. We have more people eating at food banks and living at homeless shelters after 8 years of this Prime Minister. But not everybody's doing badly. His friends at McKinsey are rolling in cash. First they said it was 50 million. Now the government says it's over 100 million. We want to know the real number. Will the Prime Minister finally answer the question? How much did he give McKinsey?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, everyone in this House, from conversations with constituents, with conversations with people right across the country, know well that Canadians are facing tough times. What the difference is between the Conservative leader and myself is, instead of proposing real solutions, instead of telling Canadians how they're going to help them and invest them, the Conservative leader stands up, crosses his arms, throws up his hands and says everything is broken. Well, that's not what Canadians are living through, Mr. Speaker. Canadians stick up for each other. We're there for each other. We support each other through the tough times. That's exactly what we've been doing through this pandemic, through these past years. That's what we will continue to do, no matter how much.
L'honorable député de Belleuil. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to see you again and all my colleagues. As you know, the Prime Minister has appointed Amira El-Gawabi, and obviously he looked into everything she'd said in the past, and some people find that very insulting towards Quebec. But he went ahead and appointed her. I'd like to ask the Prime Minister, does he actually think that that appointment is going to be inclusive and bridge building rather than divisive? The Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, last night I had the honor to be in the Grand Mosque in Quebec City with a community that 6 years ago was the victim of a terrible terrorist attack by someone motivated by hatred, by intolerance, and by ignorance of the Muslim community in Quebec City and all across the country. We all have a duty to stand up every day to recognize and fight against Islamophobia, to recognize that we all have some work to do. We have to be there for our Muslim fellow citizens, and we always will be. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, Ms. El-Gawabi says that Bill 21 is Islamophobic. And rather than condemning her, I demanded a meeting with her. I asked for a meeting as elected officials, as members of Parliament who will be voting on the budget. Can the Prime Minister tell us whether he hopes that meeting will take place? Will he facilitate that? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, with all my heart, that meeting will take place. I think it'll be a great conversation. Will take place. I think it'll be a great conversation.